school students here for the weekend, the entire weekend. And the girls were above my room. That's all I'll say. The girls are not as quiet as you think they are. But it was a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And at the end of the retreat, the closing liturgy was here in the chapel, and there were about 250 people gathered. The students, some of their pastors, and their parents were here. And it was just an incredible experience of faith. And I feel really confirmed that what we're doing here at Holy Family is a good thing for youth ministry. But I do realize how old I am after this weekend. I was telling the students this morning, because several of them were talking about getting their license, a story that I heard once about fathers and young people getting their license. And the story goes like this. A young man came home and said to his dad, "Dad, I just got my driver's license, so would it be okay if I used your car?" And the father replies, "Okay, but first you have to get good grades in school. You have to keep your room clean. You have to make sure that the yard is neat and in perfect condition. And you have to cut your hair. So come back in a few weeks when all that is done, and we'll talk about it." Well, several weeks passed, and the young man came back, and he said to his dad, "Dad, I got great marks on my report card, and I've been keeping my room especially clean. Even Mom thinks it's okay. And," he said, "the yard is in tip-top shape. How about letting me use the car?" And the father replied, "That's all true, but you didn't cut your hair." And the son said, "But Dad, even Jesus had long hair." And the father replied, "Yes, you're right, exactly. Jesus did have long hair. And Jesus walked everywhere." So, not a good excuse for borrowing a car. Well, the scriptures tonight are so rich, I can't pass them by. And as I was reading the gospel during the week, I was thinking that I was never good at getting started on writing assignments. Even now, I mean, it goes all the way back to high school, but even now it's tough. Brandon will write me an email and he'll say, "I need your letter for the newsletter by Friday." And I sit there and I just look at the computer. It's very, very hard to get started. But I remember those days in high school when you get an assignment, write 500 words on some issue, immigration or politics or some well-known figure. And I just could never seem to get the first sentence off. Once I got writing, I was okay, but it was tough getting my mind in gear. I think it was easier to write when some teachers would start the paper for us. They would give us the opening line and then allow us to use our imagination to finish it. So something like this, they would say, "Here's your first sentence. I believe in immigration because," well, that got me going. Or, "the political debates make me feel uneasy because," or, "Lady Gaga is interesting because." Whatever the starter, you can always pick up from there. But my imagination needed that opening line. Jesus must have been a good teacher, because in the Gospel of Mark today, that's what he does, at least for me. He doesn't tell us in exact words what the kingdom of God is, though we love to know what is the kingdom of God like that we've been talking about for all these years. But he starts the sentence like this. He says, "This is how it is with the kingdom of God." And then he tells a story, and it's in that story that our imagination can really envision in our own way what the kingdom of God is like. Now, he tells two stories tonight in the gospel, and they're wonderful stories. The first is a very short parable about the man who scatters the seed everywhere. And is lost on us because we're not farmers, at least most of us are not. But in the time of Jesus, no one would just scatter seed everywhere. It was too precious a commodity. But this man that Jesus speaks of, he really got his listeners' attention because he said, the man scattered seed everywhere, and then he didn't even do anything. He just went to sleep and got up every day, and somehow the seed produced a beautiful harvest, a beautiful harvest. Well, the people would have been amazed at that because they knew that to produce something you had to hoe around the thing that you had planted and water it and take care of it and fertilize it. But in this parable, the man just scatters the seed. And what he's talking about is God's providence. And it's the same way with the mustard seed, the next parable. That tiny seed that we can't imagine would produce anything, and it produces the largest tree of all the earth. It's God's providence. But what does that mean for us, God's providence? Many people will say that things happen for a reason. They believe that. Things happen for a reason. But when our faith pulls that together, sometimes we go a little bit too far with it. We take it to an extreme. Something bad will happen and we'll say, well, God meant this to be. Well, of course, God didn't mean that to be. But God's providence is about the care that we receive when life simply happens as it will. And it certainly will happen. I was thinking in God's providence about the young woman from Yale who a few weeks ago graduated with high honors. Her name was Maria Keegan. Maybe you remember the story in the newspaper. She wrote a musical. She was the editor of the newspaper at Yale. And the tragic story goes that just a few days after her graduation, she was killed in a car accident on Cape Cod. That isn't an example of God's providence. But I'm sure that what her family is now experiencing is God's providence. The care that is being given to them by her friends and their family. God somehow gets us through what we never imagined we would make it through. I was telling young people who were on retreat, some of them were seniors, and they were saying that at the beginning of this year, they were so nervous, filled with anxiety. They didn't know where they were going to go to school. They had to take all these tests. They had to do all, it's a huge hurdle, that senior year. And here they were on retreat. They had completed everything. And I said, see, you made it. And they were like, yeah, I guess I did. Because we think ourselves into disaster. We think ourselves into failure. And God's providence reminds us that it will be okay. And that's what we believe. I was struck by the notion of God's providence on this Father's Day. I imagine that fathers need to have a lot of trust in God's providence. They have a lot of responsibility. Not that mothers don't, but there's a certain kind of expectation of fathers. It's a stereotype that we have, but that somehow they will take care of things. They will be there. And those who do it well and take it seriously must have to put a lot of themselves into God's providence. Tonight, we've invited some within our community to share just a little bit about their fathers and to help us to remember what providence is about in our lives. And so I'm going to invite first Mark Bonneguy, one of our Eucharistic ministers, whose dad recently passed away, to begin the sharing.
My dad, Lawrence Vonnegut, was a comedic and creative genius. He was a good friend and an amazing cook. He was always very busy too. In the last year of his life, he made it to almost every single UConn game, whether it was at stores or in Hartford. He was very committed to that. I'm sure when he got to the pearly gates, he was just as busy. I'm sure as soon as he got through, he was scouting for a new softball team and probably looking for ingredients for his legendary apple pie. So when I pray at night, I've added my dad to my prayers. I hope that he's not too busy and taking some time to listen, but I know he's always there. More than anything, I'm glad that he got to meet his granddaughter. I know that meant the world to him. And today, I just like to remember him as a great father and a great grandfather.
From the minute I was born, I have always been absolutely a daddy's girl. Everyone always says that I look like my mom, and then they see my dad, and they immediately take that back. There is not one person on this earth whose approval means more to me than my father's. He is smart, thoughtful, caring, and absolutely hilarious. One of the greatest challenges of my young life has been determining whether my father's elaborately spun stories ever actually happened. He'll tell a story for a half hour, and at the very end of the story, there'll be something that just doesn't sound absolutely right, and you realize the whole thing has actually been a complete lie. Like, we had a cousin who won a bronze in the Olympics and for bobsledding, and after that he told everybody, and I mean everybody, that he taught her how to bobsled. And I just like to say thank you to my father for everything he's done for me and for supporting me in absolutely every endeavor I have come to face, and that I am so proud to be his daughter and that I love him.
My father, Matt Conway, has always been a great role model for me and my siblings. There are many aspects that make him a great father. First off, he has worked so hard all of his life, from school up until now. He has commendable work ethic and never rests until his work is done. His perseverance is laudable, and I hope that I will have the same motivation. Secondly, my dad is very involved in my life and has loved coaching my sisters and I in multiple sports throughout the years. My dad also gives the best advice and supports me in whatever I do. Lastly and most importantly, my dad is a true family man. He always puts our family in front of everything and provides a great life for us. He promotes Christian values in the house and teaches us about God. He also brings us to church every week, even this week when I'm sure he'd like to be watching the U.S. Open. My father is a great, loving, and caring man, and one day I hope to be as good of a father as him, because every day I'm proud to be his son. Happy Father's Day.
I feel lucky to have had two fathers in my life, and part of who I am today comes from the lessons those two fathers have taught me. My biological and my stepfather. My stepfather has taught me many of the practical lessons in life, such as you only get one chance at a first impression, how to tie a tie, how to take care of the car when it breaks down. I learned that one the hard way. And I don't remember much my biological father taught me, except the importance of being tough while playing hockey. But I try to apply that lesson to everything I do now today. So happy Father's Day.
When Father David asked me if I would want to say a few words about my dad tonight, I instantly got choked up on the thought of speaking to all of you about the impact my father has had on my life. When I called my mom to tell her to make sure the family would be here, her first response was, "You're gonna cry." You see, while I've been blessed with many great characteristics from my dad, I've been cursed with my mom's tear ducts. So I'm going to do my best to keep our eyes dry, but no promises. My dad has always led by example and let his actions speak for the type of man he is. Volunteering his time in craftsmanship to complete small projects at our church, taking days off to drive 4 hours to see me pitch, only lasting 3 innings, and then giving me words of encouragement after a disappointing start. Coaching just about every team my siblings and I played on growing up, teaching me to take pride in my work, and facing adversity and challenges like no one else I've ever met, showing me that really matters in life is family. He's probably hoping I stop talking soon because of his many great qualities. The greatest is his humility. My father is kind, loving, caring, and fair. He has been my coach, my teacher, my role model, and my friend. Dad, I love you. I can only aspire to be the dad you've been and continue to be. Happy Father's Day. I love you. The choir would like to dedicate our next song to all the fathers out there who've raised us up to more than we can be.
Thank you.